welcome to the program. This is the Money Show. I am Nancy. Thank you for joining us today. Of course, it's no longer news that Nigeria is in a recession, not a technical recession, so to speak. Inflation numbers skyrocketing. Inflation numbers as of July are released by the National Bureau of Statistics at 17.1%, unemployment at 13.3%, a GDP contraction of 2.06%. Where do we go from here? That's what I'll be looking at on today's edition of the program. Of course, that's what we've been looking at, because for those that have been following us for many years now, this is a business program that's been on this channel for like a decade. And now we've been trailing and we've been following what's been happening in finance world, business, and the economy. So that's what I'll still be looking at today. If you take a calibration of what's happening around the country, I think I did say on the show yesterday that almost everyone is now an economic analyst. You know, most programs that are not even have economy in focus now discuss economy because of the times that we are in. I'll be focusing on that today. The special advisor to the president on economic matters is my guest, Dr. Adeyemi Dikpeolu. He will be joining me shortly. I will also be hearing from him, of course, and let him tell us what the government is doing to pull us out of recession. All right, just before we go into all of that, let's take this report on, of course, internship. And the value of internship has been a topic of some sort of debate among, of course, the academia, so to speak, at an event held in Abuja. The role of the graduate internship scheme, the GIS, implemented by the federal government in the areas of reducing the vulnerability of unemployed graduates and building manpower base towards attaining development, of course, were highlighted. Our reporter Phoebe Tukuru looks at the important role of internship. Take a listen.
Interns are very important because they substantially increase the chance of graduates finding employment. The Graduate Internship Scheme, GIS, commenced in October 2012 as a social safety net component of Subsidy Reinvestment and Empowerment Program, SHOPE. It was implemented by the Federal Ministry of Finance with a mandate to provide short-term employment for graduates.
As you will be aware, the GIS, Graduate Internship Scheme, since inception, has demonstrated high prospect for job creation and social protection of our youth. It presents an opportunity for graduates to gain employment in organizations where they work, in other organizations or self-employment.
Internships also allow interns to make contact with managers and recruiters, which can later be used to negotiate full-time employment.
So far, 41,161 graduates have benefited from the scheme. To expand their businesses, they set up using GIS stipends, and many have set up cooperative associations, some of which have transformed into SMEs. Rather than seeking for work, they are now becoming employers of labor.
It is not unusual for graduates to return to the organizations who hired them as intern for full-time employment. Graduate recruitment surveys have found that almost half of all employers convert at least a fifth of their interns into permanent staff members. Phoebe Tukur reporting for the Money Show.
All right, we'll take a break, of course, but the break we will be taking, the Money Show was on the streets. We went out yesterday to find out how Nigerians are preparing, of course, for the Eid holiday. Monday, Tuesday, the federal government has declared as public holiday. Of course, if you look around now, you see that the ramps have come out. But when I was driving home yesterday, my cameraman is laughing. Why? You know, when I was driving home yesterday, I actually took a look at where they sell rams. You know, I was just driving slowly to see if I'll see some kind of activity. I must tell you, it wasn't that. In fact, I could count cars there, perhaps one or two, you know. So, crew went out to the street and brought us back. Also, tell us how you're preparing for the holiday. Will it be a dry one, or you cut your coat according to your cloth, isn't it? Then after that, Dr. Dikpeolu will be joining me, the special advisor to the president on economic matters. We have so many things to talk about. We'll be right back.
Muna san rago lokaci in yayi yanzu kamar lokacin layya muna amfani da rago don saboda shine muhimmanci a mutane gaba ɗaya. In dai rago ne lokacin layya muna amfani da rago. Rago mun kawo Najeriya muna faduwa saboda in an yi canji. Sai fa yanzu canji naira 700. Da kawo bara 350. Mutane kuma sun zo shigo sayan rago suna cewa ba kuɗi. Kamar ragon da muke saida 70 yanzu muna saida shi 55 45.
Yanzu ragon 70,000 a waccan shekarar yanzu shine 120, 110 kuma ga Najeriya ba kuɗi.
So the price of the transportation has increased than last year. Last year by now we have almost sell our rams. The customer are not patronizing us.
The market is full of animals because the patronage is very low. People are interested in buying, but the cost of the animals is very expensive. These rams, we used to buy them 25,000, 30,000, 35,000. But now it goes for 40,000, 45,000.
Like the way you see now, we are expecting customers to come and buy, but when some comes, when you tell them price, they don't have the money, it's too expensive. And when you really look, there is no money in circulation.
Since I've come, I've never even said anything. We are just sleeping. I'm just waking up from my sleep now.
For Sawa market, I know market used to hot now. Since morning that we are sitting there. When you say, if we sell one now, before you sell again in the next 1 hour.
We don't produce rice. Now they want to start producing rice, which we don't even know. And so if we are buying a mudu of rice, 500, what about a mudu of gari? Before it was 180, now it's 300 naira. I don't know, is it the increment of dollar or is the increment of, because even bag of gari, does gari too come in dollars? Do we buy it in dollars? Or we buy crayfish in dollars? So I want to know, is it the fault of the sellers or is it the fault of those that are importing it?
All right, welcome back. In case you're just joining us, it's still the Money Show, of course, where we'll keep you up to the minute and up to speed with what's happening around the economy, finance, investment, and market world. As I did say at the beginning of the program, we'll be speaking with the special advisor to Mr. President on economic matters, Dr. Adeyemi Dikpeolu. I need to say that some Nigerians don't actually know that there's a special advisor on economy. Here he is today. Dr. Dikpeolu, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
How you doing?
I'm happy to be here.
You're happy to be here. Okay, let me start by saying, why do you think that most Nigerians don't think that you are there?
Well, I really do not know why that would be the case. I am there, I'm on the ground, I work with the economic management team, and I have been out there, I've given several speeches. I've represented the Vice President on several occasions, speaking about economic issues, and so I really cannot explain why that is the case, but then maybe you will help solve that today.
Okay, perhaps it's, would I say, because I'm speaking on behalf of Nigerians, you know I do this show every day, right. And I get feedback from a lot of people. In fact, as we are on now, I know people will start sending tweets, messages that I will take within the program. I know you've been there for a while. I knew that until perhaps the president inaugurated, isn't it, inaugurated some of you, that some people are like, oh, there's an essay on economy, on economic matters. Why do you think that is actually so? Is it because the impact is not being felt yet?
No, not at all. I do think, as I said before, that it's probably just a question of the fact that there's so much that people have to absorb on a daily basis. But I've been there, I've been out there. Just a quick Google and you'll see places where I've represented the Vice President.
For how long have you been there?
I've been in place effectively since January.
Since January of this year.
Yes.
So I think that answers the question, Nigerian. So Dr. Dikwe, the special advisor to the president on economy, has been there since January, and we're in September now, 9 months.
Yeah.
Dr. Dikwe, the economy is in a recession.
Right.
Are you feeling it?
Yes, I feel it like every other Nigerian. I feel it like the average Nigerian who sees food prices spiking up. I feel it like the middle class Nigerian who suddenly finds that some of the things they were used to doing, they cannot do it before. And I know that even the very wealthy Nigerians feel that their portfolios have been affected, including through the performance of the stock exchange. But I think that there is a very good context, and the first context is to continue to bear in mind that it's actually a global phenomenon, but each country is trying to manage it as best as they can. Secondly, within that global phenomenon, some particular types of countries have been hard hit, and I talk in particular of the oil and energy dependent economies. And so a quick search would reveal that a lot of the economies that have oil, including notably Saudi Arabia, big as it is, it has also had to see how it can adjust to that fall in oil prices. But having said that, I think also that a close look at the president's budget speech and the strategic implementation plan, which was issued in March, would show that government had already known that this external shock would affect the Nigerian economy.
Did the government know at that time that it was going to be like this, that Nigeria would enter a recession? Because I remember as of July of 2015, the central bank, in fact, I heard it clearly from Mr. Emefiele, Godwin Emefiele. I was in one of the meetings, and he said, if we don't take time, if we're going the way it is going, that the economy would enter a recession. Did the federal government realize at that point that it was going to be like this?
Let me say that nobody can predict, not even the United States, as you know, that was at the epicenter of the Great Recession in 2008, knew that they were going to fall into a recession. The key thing to remember is that there was a global economic environment which was showing that whether you like it or not, there will be shocks, particularly to emerging economies, and apart from emerging economies, to oil-producing economies. But the federal government, as early as December, if you read the president's budget speak clearly, had shown that there was going to be a path, but we're not going to do austerity, because some would say you are going down economically, tighten. But they chose to say, no, let's try and boost the economy so that we spend on the things that help the economy to grow. So that was a conscious choice. And that was a conscious choice realizing that, look, you can't, when the economy is looking a bit shaky, go and start increasing taxes. So that was a conscious choice to say, okay, we want to spend, but we cannot increase taxes. So how about we try to use the space available to us, which is the fact that our non-oil taxes are some of the lowest in the world. Our non-oil tax revenue to GDP is only about 4%. That's lower than some of the other African countries that don't even have oil at all, which are at about 13 to 15%. So there was some space that said, let's try and ramp up revenues by trying to get money from those who are not in the tax net and should be in the tax net. So you find that the FIRS was working hard, and they have tried to bring 700,000 companies plus into the tax net. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that there was a realization that there may be a slowdown, and that there are two policy options to a slowdown. One is to say, I used to have 100 naira. Now I have 50 naira. There are two ways to go about it. One is to say, I'm going to cut everything down to 50 naira. You know what that means? That means job layoffs. That means inability to spend on social services. That means inability to spend on infrastructure. But if you say no, that I think that this economy has the sort of resilience that is needed, and what we need to do is to try and avoid getting into that situation, and let's try hard to spend money on consumption. So what the federal government do, which I really applauded, first was to say, okay, state people are not being paid salaries in states. 3 interventions of various natures have been made by the federal government to support the state, irrespective of political affiliation, to say this is our country, these are our people, they are not being paid salaries, we cannot turn away, we're going to help to get those salaries paid. And the good part of that, I think, is that you realize that the states can be multiple centers of prosperity. So we're not talking only of Abuja, we're not even talking only of Lagos, but we're saying that all those state capitals, if people get salaries, you know the number of people who depend on salary earners.
But it seems that that hasn't also helped, you know, because I know, I just want to chip in there so that you would conclude on your thought. It also hasn't helped because it's like they've gone back to square one, because some states are even still owing 3-4 months salary. We know how the governors of the states, of course, have been living lives and expending, not just now, but even in the past. That has also brought us here, especially right now that all prices are lower.
Let's be fair to the states, and I'm not speaking on anybody's behalf, to say that indeed the last time round they did work with the federal government on a fiscal sustainability plan
I understand
to
that.
try and also improve their own public financial management, to try and see ways in which they could scale up IGR, to try and find out ways in which they could curtail waste, and to bring even more transparency to their records, their money, the way they spend money, you know, so giving audited reports and that kind of thing. So I just want to say that you have to give that credit because, look, at the end of the day, those are conditions.
About 23 of them or 22 of them.
Yes. So if you accept those conditions, it's also an indication that you are willing to try your very best to see how you can resolve that problem. But what I was trying to say was, I'm going back to that, was to say that we're trying to boost demand at that level, right? But you're also saying that part of the whole equation is involved around jobs. So you say, okay, people need jobs, and if people have jobs, they will have some money to spend. So you're saying that let's just try and find money to take 500,000 young graduates and put them into jobs in their communities, by the way, not in the center. So almost like you call Mark II, but you go to your community, you be either a teacher.
Are you talking about the teachers, the 500
teacher
teachers?
Corps, yes. The teacher corps, and then they work as agricultural extension workers.
100,000
and they work,
of them?
yes, and they work as public health workers. So the idea is, again, is to say, find the resources, put young people to work, take them out of that cycle of saying, I don't have a job. It's not going to be a permanent thing, but it gives time for them to acquire other skills. So they'll be given devices which they will use to become more familiar with IT. And IT is another area where we are trying to say we can be part of the world, we can leapfrog. And I always try to point out to people that I think it's part of the effort of federal government that, and working with young people in technology, that brought Mark Zuckerberg here the other day. In other words, the Aso Villa Demo Day was to try and show people what young Nigerians are doing. And I'm told there are over 3,000 applications, and 30 were shortlisted and 3 won. But these are young Nigerian entrepreneurs who are working in the IT space and who are helping in their own ways to help boost the economy. What am I trying to say? I'm saying that in addition to trying to stabilize the situation, keep money there, you're trying to prepare for the long term.
So you're saying, in essence, that to pull the country out of recession now, the federal government is spending. So the federal government has gone all the way Keynesian. But the question will be, you're nodding, the question will be, do we even have that money to spend, bearing in mind prices of oil, or price of oil has gone down? I do also know that according to the Minister of Finance, that she said, I don't know if the data has changed now, that over 400 billion naira has been put into capital projects so far, getting the contractors back to work. But the question will be, how far should we go? Because the economy is contracting, and contracting at a heavy pace. Of course, you did listen to some of the report that we put there. We had to go out to see how people are even going to prepare for this festivity, the Muslim festivity over this weekend. And people are really not optimistic. Nigerians are really not optimistic. They're seemingly not seeing like an articulated policy from government, because I've spoken to a lot of people on this show for a while now, for a long time now, and they've told me on this program, we need President Buhari's articulated vision on the economy. It seems this one is saying this, can we collate them? Like what we had in the past, seeds, needs, and all of that. Is there anything like that? I've asked you like 2 questions in one. So
about 5, in fact.
Okay.
But let me take them one after the other. I think the first has to do with oil. oil prices are going to be lower for longer. And the reason they're going to be lower for longer is because of the shale oil revolution in the United States, whereby once oil prices go above a particular level, I would say about $50 a barrel, the shale oil production will swoop in, and therefore to begin to think they are going to get more money coming into the economy from oil short term is going to be a problem. But I say that even the little you have, we haven't been able to maximize for reasons that we all know about in terms of our production challenges. So that's the first thing about oil. The second thing about where will you find the money, and that's what the federal government, as I try to explain, two things. First was to say, let's look for revenues from the non-oil sector. Let's look for the money from within, from the people who have not been paying taxes and have been having a good time. They really should contribute to the commonweal. So as I said, FIRS has brought 700,000 companies into the tax net, but yes, we're going to borrow. But when you borrow, you don't borrow for consumption. You try and borrow to pay for investments. And those investments are the kinds of things, first, that they will pay their way, but they also have a boost effect on the economy. So if you borrow to build the infrastructure, to build the power stations, to build the roads, to build the railways, they will have an impact, but there will be a lag, of course, because it will take time. Let's use roads. It will take time for the contractors to begin to mobilize, to begin to get people out into the street, to begin to bring back their laid-back workers and all that. But that was complicated, and I think the Minister of Power Works and Housing gave a very good interview where he explained that even when some of the money came, we were owing contractors for about 2 years. And so we also, I mean, like any human being, if someone owes you some money and he gives you money, you're going to try and use it to defray, especially if you borrowed that money. But so I think one success has been to even just sit down with people and agree that some of this money, yes, you can use it for some of the past, but please try and deploy it for the present. So what I'm trying to say is that, yes, there's going to be a problem with oil revenue. Yes, we are going to have to try and find money through various sources. But I think the most critical thing is about planning, is to say, and it's a pity I didn't know how demonstrative I would be allowed to be. I brought a copy of the plan. Okay. It's outside in the studio. There is a strategic implementation plan. And
okay, they can get it for me. Please get the plan. Let's see.
And it's been passed since March, even before the budget came out.
A strategic plan?
Implementation plan for the budget. And the idea was to say that, look, it takes, properly done, 6 months at the least, 1 year, to bring out a properly articulated plan, for the simple reason that you have to consult all sectors of society. It's not ideal to sit down in a room, no matter how brilliant you are, write something and just issue it. And so I recall that just 2-3 weeks ago, the Joint Planning Board, bringing the Ministry of Budget and National Planning and the states' ministries of budget and planning together to begin to think through how should our next medium-term plan look. And I say this because, so this strategic implementation plan was just to show policy direction, building on the budget speech of the president, and to show that we have these priorities, and it's in front of you. Yeah. If you open it, not only do you have the fundamental pillars, you have the intervention areas as prioritized, and they tell a consistent story of what you're trying to do.
Are we looking at a holistic plan over the next 4 years that Mr. President will be there, or we are taking it piecemeal by piecemeal?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You've got it. First, you've got it. There are 3 elements to this. The first is that here we are in January. Yeah. You need to articulate a plan, right? And you articulate a plan to say, this plan will show you policy direction as we move ahead and some of the short-term things we intend to do. But as we do that, we will move on to a more long-term planning process. And you, of course, know that the medium-term expenditure framework, which at least has the elements of the plan over the next 3 years.
Medium-term, to long-term.
At least, well, it's an expenditure framework and it's a fiscal framework, but it shows you the elements around which you can build a long-term medium development plan. And as I said, because of the need for consultations, the need to have all stakeholders in the room, the process of bringing those stakeholders together for the longer-term plan has indeed started. And there is no reason going forward where we cannot draw on some of the rich work that exists in our country over the years. You know, so if you want me to, I can speak to some of the elements of this plan straight away. The whole idea, as I mentioned already, of just getting the policy space right, trying to get more revenues, trying to stop wastage.
Now, if you have this plan and you're thinking of doing that over the medium to long term, why do you think that most Nigerians also feel that this administration is not prepared, especially to handle economic challenges? Because a lot of people have said, and a lot of people were very optimistic when the president came in that. In fact, a guest of mine told me prior to the elections in 2015, before me, he said, Nancy, I'm going to vote for Buhari. And I asked him why. He said, because Mr. President, then General Buhari, is the most prepared president that we will have. I asked him why. He said, because it took him 12 years. Or he will take him 12 years. It took him 12 years to get there. In other words, preparation. Why do you think that most people are saying that this administration is not adequately prepared?
That's what worries me about the narrative. It worries me that even something that has been published with resources and is available on the website is not even known. That's what worries me. And what worries me, and help me here, is that you could even articulate a medium-term plan tomorrow, and there will still be, there's no plan. Because what I'm trying to say is that a lot of effort has gone into it, a lot of thinking has gone into it, and an attempt to show that, look, this is the policy direction. But the truth of the matter, and let me be...
So there's really a policy direction?
It's there.
Because people also say this administration is directionless.
Oh, wait, they say, look, it's there. I can even sit there and say that the policy of this government is to reposition and revitalize the economy for structural change. But I would even say inclusive structural change. What do I mean by structural change? When you talk of diversification, what you're trying to say is that you're trying to reduce the dependence on oil. Yes, oil is only 8% of GDP now, but the truth is that it affects other sectors. You know better than me that a lot of the banks have links to
non-performing loans
and to the oil sector. And so there's a great deal of link to the oil and gas sector, even for the rest of the economy. So what you're trying to do is to say, while maximizing what you can get out of oil, you're trying to say, let's diversify. And let's diversify into agric. Let's do solid minerals. Let's do manufacturing.
But that's not a day's job, Dr. Dikbolo.
Bless you. That's the point. It's not a day's job. Yeah. That's why you're trying to stabilize.
So are we trying to get the quick wins, the low-hanging fruits quickly to get us out of recession? Because if we don't, we may eventually head to a depression.
I've just spoken of the low-hanging fruits. Let me finish the low-hanging fruits. The low-hanging fruits were make sure people have money in their pockets. Try to generate jobs as quickly as you can, even though long-term people should be employed in the private sector. Try to put money into investment so that they have a multiplier effect on the economy. Try, and that's the other part, is to be inclusive. When you hear of conditional cash transfers, some people say 5,000 naira is not much. It's a lot of money to a lot of people. But even the intention is not meant to be your total income. It's just meant to boost your income so that, and the idea is to give it to the women because they say that the women will use the money for the family. And so they will say, maybe I'm going to improve the protein intake for my children. With this money, I can buy eggs for them every now and then. With this money, I can stagger maybe a new pair of shoes for this one, a new pair of shoes for that one. And it's proven. There's a major study by the Overseas Development Institute in the UK, but also that we all know about in Brazil, the Bolsa Familia was used to reduce the Brazilian poverty rate very, very quickly. So those insights were there, and the intention was to say, let's try and get money into people's hands also to help them to move out of poverty, but also to create demand for soap, for things that are made within the economy. So what I'm trying to say is that two dimensions to it. The first dimension is let's stabilize the situation. Let's pay salaries. Let's give people jobs.
But the situation is not stabilized yet.
I'm coming to that. I'm coming to it. Let's give, let's do all that. And when we've done all that, as we do that, let's prepare for the future. Let's invest in infrastructure that will bring the cost of doing business down for the businesses. Let's do ease of doing business so that the frustrations of someone who's trying to succeed in business are reduced. And to even show, you use an external metric like the World Bank, ease of doing business. It's just to give yourself a guide, and a neutral guide. So you can tell yourself, are you deceiving yourself, or are you really doing what you want to do? I think it's excellent, because that way you're measuring yourself against the rest of the world. Because again, to compete, it's about the world, it's not about us alone. But let me come back to the question of the impact. the truth of the matter is that, given all that, there are unforetold shocks. We could predict the price shock. So we budgeted at $38 a barrel. It fell to 28, but it has averaged back now to even slightly more than 38 because of it's been hovering around.
It's 49 today.
Yes, it's been hovering over 40, 45. Yeah. It's been hovering there. But, and I say this with all due respect, we didn't prepare for production shocks. Because the truth of the matter is that when you're trying to stabilize, it doesn't matter if you're trying to diversify. You said it beautifully, it will take a while. So you still have to use what you have. Meanwhile, if you've lost 1 million barrels a day of oil of what you've been using to sustain yourself, it will affect you. That's the honest truth.
Now, Dr. Dikmili, the question also would be, should the price of oil even affect us at all? That we're having oil prices around 49 today. I think yesterday it got to 50. Right. It's gotten, in fact, August was the best month for oil so far. Yeah. This year, about 52, 53. There was a time in this country that oil was selling globally for $13, $15, right. And we did not die. Yeah. So now that oil is around $50 thereabouts, what happens? That's one. The second one also is that I understand what you said at the beginning, that the government is also spending, trying to do infrastructure and all of that. But the question is, as we are spending, what are we spending on? Who are those that are taking these monies? Are these monies going back into the hands of our people, or they are going back into foreign contractors, so to speak, that will send that money abroad? So we're still looking at capital flight, because it should still be a total value chain in the country, because you can't be spending and it's still not getting to the pockets of the people.
Okay, let me speak to the oil price thing. First of all, to say that you shouldn't use oil prices of 10, 15 years ago with oil prices now, because you have to factor out inflation. But apart from factoring out the inflation, you have to factor out the depreciation over time of currencies. So a man who had $100,000 in 1950s was a very rich man. Now in the United States, he can't talk when billionaires are talking. So that's the nominal growth in things. But there's also the fact that we were also slightly more people now than we were then. And the needs have sort of increased. I don't even want to talk about the cost of governance. I just want to say that. So that's one reason why you cannot compare those two periods. But I think the more fundamental point goes to what I've been trying to say, which is that you need to restructure the economy. But you cannot restructure the economy overnight, and you said so yourself. So it has to be a two-pronged approach. How do I stabilize things? How do I get people out? So really, if you put money to conditional cash transfers through BVN, and it goes into their account, one of the beauties of BVN, a foreign contractor can't take it away from me, right? If I choose, when I'm eating rice, to eat ofada rice, nobody's going to come and sell rice from abroad to me because I'm eating ofada rice. And so you even find that in the same time as we're saying all these things, we have a made in Nigeria story going around there, which everybody is trying to rally around. So yes, it's part and parcel of the story that let's patronize what we have, but that's not autarky. All successful economies import and export. You import capital goods, you export some things, you import some things. What you export, though, must have value. You must add value. Don't just sell cocoa out there. Try and process it a bit so you claim some of the value chain. You know, even oil. Don't just sell oil out there. Refine it. And that's why I said that in the long haul, but the shoots are beginning to emerge. If we fix the refineries, and I know that the Minister of Petroleum Resources is working very hard on that, we will get some relief, but we'll also get some relief from some of the investments taking place in the oil sector around, you know, what Alaji Dangote is doing, you know, what some of the people are doing with fertilizer in Dorama and Co. So, in other words, I think that the critical thing, as you said now, is let's stabilize the situation. Let's get the money into the hands of people, and let's that some of that money will also go to boosting demand so that local manufacturers will begin to feel some of that effect. Farmers will begin to feel some of that effect. But while we do that, let's begin to work on the supply side. Let's boost agricultural production enough so that we can improve food security. The truth of the matter is no big nation relies on imported. It's just not done strategically.
Is the government doing enough to even encourage made in Nigeria products, for example? Because there's this slogan, oh, buy Nigeria, made in Nigeria, that we should encourage our companies. Is the government doing that? Is the government, as it is right now, both federal and state government, encouraging, like the auto manufacturers? Let's take, for example, the Innocent manufacturing company. How many government cars are Innocent made? I know there are some, there are a few of them. I know, like the DG of BPSR, he drives an Innocent car. But why I've just brought an Innocent is just for an example, because these are also some of the things that you need to do to rejig.
Okay, let me speak about the specific and then we go to the general. The specific is that if you're not buying cars because you don't have money, you're not going to buy Innocent, right? And I don't know whether anybody has bought cars in government this year. So that's the first answer. But the second and the more important one, yes, buy Nigeria. Do you know that there are laws that have been in this country for years saying buy Nigeria? But now this government is saying that let us scale up on that. Let us begin to think in terms of local content provisions specifically that would sort of say that in this area we are promoting local content. And we do it in a targeted manner. And I think roll out over the next few weeks, I think some of those things will begin to come to fruition.
Okay. A lot of people have been sending tweets, actually. You know, people are sending tweets and questions to ask Dr. Dikbeolu. I will come to that in a bit. But Dr. Dikbeolu, tell us about what was in the media in the past, of course, 2-3 weeks ago. Is the president seeking emergency powers to reflate the economy? What's the situation? Because some papers took it, then the next day, I think, a statement from Mr. Akonde's office, Laola Akonde, came out. Is the president seeking emergency powers to reflate the economy?
Okay. I've read various versions of that story. And so what I do know that is going on, and I think Mr. Akonde put it beautifully, is that precisely what you were asking for was taking place. In other words, people were sitting down and saying, what is the best way by which we can respond to this situation? And first of all, that the best way is to convey some sense of urgency that we need to get things done. And if you want to get things done, and you have a plan that you think if it was working as quickly as it could, would sort of address the situation, then you are saying, by what processes, by what means can that impact come about quickly? So it's not so much seeking emergency powers. In other words, it's a question of what measures do we need to take as a nation to sort of fast track the impact that the policies that government is going to undertake. By what means are best? In other words, if it gets to the stage where it is felt that, oh, this would require going for legislation, I think it would only be wise to do so.
Do you think it has not gotten to that level? Because in the US, for example, 2008 recession, it took President Obama immediately when he came in, 30 days later, he and himself and Congress came together. They established what they call the American Recovery Reinvestment Act, the Economic Stimulus Plan, passing over $800 billion in spending and tax cuts. Have we gotten to that plan yet, to that place yet, where Mr. President would speak to Congress and say, guys, we're in a terrible situation, we need to get out of this?
Well, you know better than I that Congress or our own
National Assembly
is on recess. But I'm sure
recess in a recession. Go ahead.
No, I'm sure when they come back, and what I find, and I'm serious, is that when it comes to issues like this, everybody rallies round. So I'm certain that by the time, and you have to do things carefully as well. I'm glad you gave the time frame that President Obama used. We're not yet even within that time frame since we got into this recession. And don't forget that, in fact, the crisis had occurred even before President Obama got to office. I even argue that that's one of the reasons he got there, but that's a different story. So what I'm trying to say is that, yes, there is going to be a response. It will come out in various ways, but the important thing is to say that a lot of thinking is going around it, but the critical thing is not looking for powers. The critical thing is, what do we need to do to fast track these processes we're talking about? If I'm trying to get money out to people, by what means can I get that money out? If I'm trying to build a road, by what means can I enable the contractor to get a bit more resources to move faster? In other words, rather than the steady trickle, you have to sort of increase it and that's what the thinking is about, how best to do that.
Okay. The other question is the president thinking of getting a team of economists away from the economic team? Because I know there's an economic management team headed by Mr. Vice President. Is there a thinking around getting a body, an economic advisory body, as some people have also said?
Let me say that.
A team of economists that would be like in a war room, so to speak, an economic war room.
Let me say that when we get to that bridge, we'll cross it. But what I want to explain is that it has been happening. You are very well informed. You know that not too long ago, Bismarck Rewane, Podio Augusto, Ayo Teriba, Akpan Ekpo, Sonny Badai were brought around the room to talk to the economic management team on economic issues. So it happens on a consistent basis. It happens even with single issues where you bring even global leaders in a particular sector to come and talk to the economic management team. So there's a lot of listening around economics. There's a lot of interface with economists. And as we move down the line, if it becomes necessary to constitute something formal, and it's a question of seeing whether it's necessary or not, again, because you don't want to lock it in to a few people. You want as many people to participate as possible.
Because Nigerians think that the present economic team isn't doing enough to bail us out.
Yeah, we started this conversation there, and I don't know that even I've told you all these things, and yet, yes, we still we're not doing enough. So, I mean, you are the interviewer, but I'd like to ask a question. What would be enough?
Enough is also relative, but the enough right now is to get Nigerians in a way not feeling the impact of the recession right now. Because do you go to the streets? Like I say on the program, the begging quotient has increased.
Yes.
There is no day that people will not come to ask you for money for food, money for transport. The other question to you is that, are the government people saying this, or they think that Nigerians are exaggerating this, especially the media? So I want to see that the kitchen cabinet, or let me not put it in the kitchen cabinet, the cabinet of the president, and the president himself understands that Nigerians are under a lot of pain. Because some people will think, oh, the president, he goes in a bulletproof car, tinted glass, he doesn't see us, and all of that. Are you, when I mean you and all of you there in Asorok, do you understand what we go through?
Look, I started my first comments.
Yes, I asked you if you're feeling it.
And I think it reflects the views. It reflects, for instance, you've heard the president himself spoke about the recession openly, publicly. The vice president has spoken about it several times, and they've reassured us that action is being taken. But critically, and I think a fundamental platform of this mobilization started yesterday. Change begins with me. It's part of it. It's part of realizing that everybody has to put their own bit into it, so that if policies are put in place also, your first instinct is not to think of how to circumvent it, but how to support it. I gave the example, and it's getting boring, but I gave it, because it struck me then, even then. In 1997, an otherwise performing economy like Korea got into this kind of situation. And I'll never forget the image of thousands of Korean women bringing their gold to say this is for our country.
But it's a social angle to it.
That's what I'm saying. So that change begins with me. That's social. All of us as a collective must see that this is our nation and this is what we need to do. And sort of put our own bit in positively, and realizing that people do feel the pain. They do. They do. And they feel it, they're passionate about it. I'm telling you, they spend waking moments, they spend hours. What is best to do? And you have to balance things as well. You don't want to do things. For instance, one of the easiest ways for a government to raise revenue is to say, hey, go and increase taxes. But you just said no. You cannot do that.
Even
when
if
the
you
economy
increase it now, where will you get it from? Yeah, where will you find it? Because companies are having difficult times and all that.
But so that's what I'm trying to say, is that who is there, and there are people even in the economic team who have been part of the private sector for a long time. So they understand how those things work. So it's, as I said before, the starting point was yesterday, I think. The change begins with me. Let's all begin to mobilize around a common cause. And as policies begin to roll out, we all begin to support them wholly and enable them to work as best as they can. But I assure you that people are working night, the people feel the pain. And that's why I think the president himself spoke, the vice president has spoken, the various ministers have spoken. And they're not being complacent about it.
All right.
And sooner rather than later, I'm sure,
Why is this notion, at least that Nigerians have, that this present administration continues to blame the past administration instead of taking responsibility? Why?
Thank you. I'm glad you asked me that question.
Blame, blame, blame. And Nigerians say, get down to work. You have the mantle right now.
Hang on. Two things. First of all, I've just showed you that the amount of work that is being done. But secondly, I don't believe in the blame game. Let's be clear. But I think it was George Santayana that said, those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it. You have to see what went wrong. So I like to give the example of America in 2007, 2008, in the Great Recession. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, was a student of the Great Depression of 1929.
Yes.
What went wrong? And therefore, by having studied it, he came to realize that, this time around, maybe instead of squeezing, we need to do quantitative easing. What am I trying to say? We must look at the past from the point of view of learning what did we not do right. And as a society, by the way, what did we not do right? Were we consuming too much? Were we consuming too much imported goods? Were we spending money on things we shouldn't be spending on instead of saving? So that's the key, blaming.
But should the government now start reiterating it at any point? Okay, we understand the past, and not even from Jonathan administration, over the years, so to speak, because if you take a look at it, how much have we earned from oil in the past, let's say 50 years or more, that we started oil production? Because countries like Norway, even Saudi Arabia, even take a look at Dubai, have saved a lot from price of oil. Now you said something which is quantitative easing while you were talking. Like in the US, they have quantitative easing. Even in the UK, quantitative easing, which is a sort of like economic stimulus. Are we going to see like a package? I know there's a 500 billion naira stimulus, social intervention, and some other things. But are we seeing a holistic stimulus package like? Okay.
Okay. I think I want to take the first point you made. You see, when we talk about learning from history, it also has to do with how it's not only economics, it's how we treated our resources as well. Did we save? Did we save for the rainy day? Did we put the economy on a firm footing for the time when the shock comes, you are more resilient to it? I think those are the things, and those I think that informed the way going forward. That let's try and put it on a firmer footing. Let's try and use resources more in a better public financial management. So those are the kind of things that I think influenced more than anything. So it's not so much about the blame game. It's more about let's not go where we were before as a nation. And but in terms of quantitative easing, I really don't want to go into that territory because it's not my territory. But just to say that, yes, indeed, but I want you to see the whole budget, not just the 500 billion for social interventions. I want you to see the whole budget as intended precisely to help boost the economy. And that's
Are you talking the whole budget now, the 70% or the 30% for capital projects?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
No, but don't forget that the budget has 30% capital project, which intention is if you invest, it will have a multiplier effect. But don't forget, part of it is also about consumption. If you're paying salaries, and you're paying salaries regularly, you are helping people to buy soap. You're helping people to buy toothpaste. In other words, you're helping people to maintain some level of consumption. So you have to see that as well. And then tied to that, as you said, is the part of inclusion. That as we spend this money, we have to think of the most poor and the most vulnerable. The people to whom 5,000 naira would make a difference. The people to whom having a job, even for 2 years, just to help me begin to acquire skills, makes a difference. The kind of people to whom an enterprise loan will help them to stabilize their business and take it to the next level, artisans, farmers, cooperatives, market women.
Okay. I need to ask this question because I don't know if you've also read what's been happening in the past week about a lot of people have been canvassing, let the president bring back the TSA funds to commercial banks. What's your view on that? That the TSA helped the TSA made funds, of course, shrank funds in DMBs, deposit money banks. What do you think?
Let me speak about the merits of the TSA first, which is basically that the TSA enabled government, first of all, and very importantly, to see just how much is coming in. It's important. You cannot manage even personal finances if you don't know the extent of your income. And if you are running a business and you're allowing one of your subsidiaries to be just spending the money without bringing it into the pot, it's not good management. So that's the first thing. So the TSC sort of says, and look, we've had this in the country in the past. There was a time where all the federal government money was kept in the treasury, by the way. So it's not new. But secondly, the TSA helps you see how money is being spent. So if money is being spent in a manner in which it attracts attention, if someone is drawing down huge resources, then it's easy to see, why is this amount of money being drawn down? Is it in part and parcel of the expenditure plan? And then, so if you look at it from that perspective, you can see that TSA is necessary. I can see that some of the commercial banks felt that, yes, it gave them a bit more liquidity to work with. But what I'm trying to say is that really, I think there's enough money out there to enable the banks to be able to operate fairly well.
Okay. So, in other words, we are not, the president is not thinking about that now. Or we haven't gotten to that level yet?
We haven't gotten to that level.
Okay. We just have about 2 minutes to go, and let me see if I can chip this in. Dr. Dikbolu, I'll ask you this question. While you ruminate on it, I'll take a few tweets from people watching, which is, you've reeled out a lot of things, and like you did say at the beginning, that you've been in this mantle since January. Do you think there's a challenge of communicating between the president and his office or this administration to the Nigerian people? Because it seems with all this thing, perhaps you're talking, we're not understanding you. So go through that. You would answer that in a bit. Let me take a few comments coming through. Okay, Cyprian Obi says government has been slow in their actions. Pumping says the major way to curb the economic recession is applying a centralized system of billings. Warake says the president has enough power to fix the economy. Rislanuddin says we should have avoided getting into this recession, but we are in it. Chinedum says, I ask, can the federal government solve community problems without restructuring Nigerians? Okay, Joel says, please ask your guests how long it will take to revive the economy. I think it's been answering that. So many questions, that's the much I can take. So very quickly before we end the show.
Yes, I think the answer is that's why I'm here.
You think you should do more?
Well, with all due respect, you know what I'm doing even to be here today, but you don't have to say that. But with all due respect, since the recession came out, since we went into the recession, I've issued a statement. I was on NTA on Monday, I was in channels on Wednesday. I'm here today. I'm trying to sell that message. But again, I know for a fact that a lot of the economic ministers have also been speaking out. And so I really don't, that's not my forte, but I do think that by and large, there is an effort to bring all this information to the attention of the public, and we certainly will continue to do a bit more to try and do that, and we'll try and do it to the best of our ability.
Many thanks for coming to today's edition of the program.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
All right. And I would say thank you for those that have followed through, of course, from the beginning of this week, from Monday till today. Of course, I've been speaking with the Special Advisor to the President on Economic Matters, of course, in the Office of the Vice President, Dr. Adeyemi Dikbolu. I hope you now know that it's been there since January. So all those tweets I get, I hope that has been laid to rest today. All right, many thanks for your comments. Thank you all. Just like the president said, change begins with me. I feel that the president has watched this show, and you know I always say it every day, that be the change you want to see. My current person is saying yes, because I'm the one, really, the disciple of that. We should be the change that we want to see and be the best that you can be. God bless Nigeria. I am Nancy Ilo. Bye now. And happy Eid, everyone. We'll see you after the holiday. Bye now.
Thank you very much.